If you're perceptive enough, you can find interesting insights in unexpected places. You can get some profound truths from things like songs, memes, even your favorite Marvel movies. We're going to talk about what the fourth Thor movie has to tell us about spiritual things, including humanity's conception of gods and how that differs from the God of the Bible. Love and Thunder picks up Thor's story after all of our favorite heroes have saved the universe. After failing to stop Thanos originally, Thor really let himself go. He's in pretty bad shape, but he decides to start working out and go on a journey to find himself. During this time, he runs into his old girlfriend, Jane Foster, which was a bit of a surprise for all of us.
Jane?
Yeah, because Natalie Portman seemed like she was totally done with Marvel movies. Well, Love and Thunder follows the same formula as Thor Ragnarok, the previous movie. There seems to have been a lot of improvisation and humor and maybe less reliance on a script. And this kind of comedic approach did work really well for its predecessor, not so much for this one. The tone was very uneven, bouncing back in between lighthearted banter for some of the characters and deep questions about evil, pain, and suffering for others. Overall, I hate to say this, but it's one of my least favorite Marvel movies, mainly because it almost gives the appearance that they turned the cameras on and told the cast to just act like they're characters for 2 hours. But let's go to the spiritual stuff, and don't worry, I'm not going to give you any spoilers. In the story, Thor has to fight a character called Gorr the God Butcher. He makes an interesting villain, although they don't really do a lot with him. But he does give us a launch pad for talking about some important spiritual matters. First of all, the movie makes an interesting contrast between Thor and Gorr, and it has to do with the perseverance in the face of loss and adversity. Once upon a time, there was a meme going around on Facebook talking about how awesome Thor was in spite of losing his mother, his friends, his father, then his brother, and finally his home. And this movie actually mentions this in one scene toward the end. But Gorr has a similar experience. He also suffers devastating loss, but instead of it driving him inward to search for meaning and identity, it brings him to one fateful conclusion.
All gods will die.
And these are the two paths that humanity takes when faced with evil and suffering. When we experience profound loss, we seem to either search for meaning in life, or we resign ourselves to the fact that the universe is meaningless and we are at its mercy. In fact, this is not only one of the more difficult challenges for Christian faith generally, it's also especially impactful with millennials and Generation Z, both of whom struggle with this question more than Generation X or baby boomers. Well, let's get into what the movie gets right about gods. During the film, we get several scenes of the gods being very unlikable. Now, Thor is a hero devoted to helping people, but he seems to be in the minority. There's one god at the beginning who is totally awful, and Zeus isn't so awesome either. So, what does the film have to say about these gods? Well, here's where it gets interesting. There's one comment that Gorr makes that I think is especially insightful. He says, "The gods will use you, but they will not help you." Looking back at the mythology of the ancient world, this comment has the ring of truth about it. For instance, in the Mesopotamian flood story, the Council of the Gods decides to destroy humanity because people are making too much noise and the gods can't get a good night's sleep. A few of the gods do seem to express reservations, but their pettiness is obvious. When reading myths like these, it is difficult to escape the fact that the gods have the very worst qualities of humanity in abundance. In fact, I think they're worse. Human beings can be capable of terrible things, but often we lack means and opportunity, or we are restrained by fear of consequences or punishment. There is something that prevents many people from being as bad as they can be. But what happens when you have unimaginable power with very little accountability? Go read the mythology and see for yourself. Another place we see this is in creation stories from the ancient Near East. They have the tendency to focus on the triviality of humankind. People aren't important, and they're basically created as slaves. Oh, they will serve the gods, or else. That is the message of ancient Near Eastern myths, and it's something that appears in Love and Thunder. But we get another insightful comment, this time from the god Zeus. He's reminiscing about the golden age of the gods on Earth, and when he's referring to humanity, he says, "They begged you for mercy without even knowing if you were listening." Now again, this is fairly accurately capturing the relationship between people and their gods in the ancient world. People didn't know if their gods were hearing their prayers, or if the gods even remembered their acts of service. They would often leave objects called votive statues in temples as reminders to the gods about how faithful the people were. And there was no such thing as a Bible in ancient religions. You had a general idea about what pleased or displeased the gods, but you could only intuit whether they were happy with you or not based on your circumstances in life. If things were going well for you, then you must be making them happy. If things were going badly, then you must have ticked one of them off. Well, without anything like a Bible, pleasing the gods almost became a matter of guesswork. That's why Psalm 119 talks about the law of God in such glowing terms. The psalmist says things like, "I find my delight in your commandments, which I love. I will lift up my hands toward your commandments, which I love. Oh, how I love your law. It is my meditation all the day. I love your law. I love your testimonies. I love your commandments above gold, above fine gold. Consider how I love your precepts." Why? Why would the psalmist make comments like this? Because in pagan religions, worshippers were at the whim of gods who were often capricious, mysterious, and inaccessible. The Mosaic Law gave the Israelites certainty about God that you couldn't find anywhere else. It revealed his expectations and his character, and it told about the love of God for his people. These were things that were virtually absent from other religious systems at the time. Now, going back to the movie, in one part, Gore describes the gods as wicked. Looking back at ancient mythology, that's hard to dispute. If we were to turn to the Greek myths, we could see that gods often punished mortals excessively, disproportionate to their crimes. Females of all kinds, whether goddesses, human women, or nature spirits, are raped with frightening regularity. These incidents are often left out of retellings of some of the more famous stories. Well, like many modern villains in literature and film, Gore the God Butcher has beliefs that elicit some of our sympathy. Although he is monstrous, some of what he believes that motivates him is indisputably true. And all we have to do is go back and look at ancient myths to see examples of it. This is where we have to point out that many people fail to appreciate the differences between pagan gods and the God of the Bible. Scripture provides an objective standard for human conduct, one that ancient mythology basically lacked. God is the reference point for righteous behavior, which would have seemed a bit odd, I think, for ancient pagans. And while some people point to difficult passages of Scripture, like the fairness of the 10 plagues or the conquest of Canaan, behind that question is an assumption that there is objective right and wrong, something that the mythical gods didn't really follow. They were extremely fickle and unpredictable. Love and Thunder tells us some interesting things about gods. I don't know if the scriptwriters intended to do this, but they did. Incidentally, the movie also tells us something about the God of the Bible. Not so much explicitly as implicitly. The movie gives us terrible examples of gods that human beings would never want to imitate. The Bible gives us a God who will make us immeasurably better if we let him.